Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Anyone at the back who waves their arms, can you all hear me? Thank you. Well, this is exciting, isn't it? A new election, a new constituency, and it's all for us to come out and vote on the big day, June the 22nd. Now, thank you all for coming this evening. And thanks to the candidates for having arranged this hustings for us, because as you know, it really is up to them to arrange their own hustings in this particular election. So many thanks to them for being able to come along and talk to us, answer our questions, and get on with the business of the election. I thank them. Well, I won't actually, not at this point, but they have asked me to be the chairman because I'm not aligned to any party or any candidate. I think I'll refer my thanks to the end of the meeting to see before seeing how it goes. I hope there'll be more light than heat this evening, and we can get a fair covering of the main issues that are facing the electorate. I've been asked also to point out that this is primarily for our constituency of St Peter's, St Owen's and St Mary's, and therefore questions should be confined to people who will be voting in this particular constituency. And I hope that if there are people from other parishes here who had come thinking that they were going to ask questions, that they will respect the fact that this is for our constituency. We have 7 very good and very interesting candidates. They will be giving their introductory talk in the order which they have drawn lots for, starting from that end of the table. And subsequent to that will last for about 2.5 minutes per candidate. After that, you will be invited to ask your questions, and I will obviously pick out from this group of people the ones who can ask their questions. Now, the questions will be taken 2 at a time, one from over there, one from over there, and then the candidates will address those 2 questions in a time of 1.5 minutes. So they'll be answering 2 questions in 1.5 minutes, which isn't a lot of time, and I suppose one of my duties will be to remind them when they've come to the end of their time, because politicians, as we all know, do have a lot to say sometimes, and that might not always be too... Where's the bell, by the way? Is there a bell? Bell, bell, bell? Sarah? Because the bell will be the end of the 1.5 minutes. I would ask also that before you ask your question, that you give your name and your parish of residence. In that way, we will be guaranteeing that you're in this constituency. Now, the 7 candidates we have, we will be voting on the 22nd of June for up to 4 of them to take the positions of deputy in our constituency. Now I'll let them introduce themselves, but initially I will just remark that here we have Helen Evans, who is the Reform candidate. Next to her we have David Benn, who is a Liberal Conservative. Then we have Lyndon Farmer, who is an Independent. We have, she's disappeared, Christina Moore, who is also an Independent, although part of a Better Way group, I understand. And we have Ian Gorse, who is an Independent, Roland Hewling, who is Jersey Alliance. Then we have at the very end there Lucy Stevenson, who is also a member of the being, or well, better way grouping as an independent. So those are our candidates. So I'll begin by asking Helen Evans of Reform to make her introduction.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for coming. It's lovely to see so many people here. My name is Helen Evans, and as the Chair said, I am the Reform Jersey candidate for this election. I'm standing for election because I believe that I have the skills to be an effective States member and an effective representative for you. I trained as an accountant at the National Audit Office in London, often referred to as the UK public spending watchdog, and after I qualified as an accountant, I spent 5 years working in the public sector group of a firm in London, Moore Stevens, where I gained further experience in managing money in the public sector, including such things as the audit of large capital projects and of procurement. I also have experience as an associate lecturer. I've been privileged to work for the Open University for 20 years, and currently I'm teaching mainly mathematics and statistics, and that covers students on a range of degree pathways, obviously in maths and statistics, but also in economics and data science. I'm standing as a candidate with Reform Jersey because I've been very impressed what I've observed of the effective teamwork of the 5 Reform Jersey members in the previous States Assembly, and I believe that it is as a Reform Jersey member that I could be most effective as a States member representing you. As we emerge from the disruption caused by COVID, we have the opportunity, and I believe the responsibility, to build a better society for the future, a more cohesive society in which people can flourish. Reform Jersey has a track record of working in the States Assembly, and we've set out in our manifesto our commitments for how we plan to continue that work in the next Assembly. If elected, I will use my skills and experience, which, as I've said, include extensive experience in the management of public money, to work with my Reform Jersey colleagues to deliver on our manifesto commitments, to make Jersey a fairer and more equal society, to prepare Jersey for the challenges of the future, and to restore government accountability and democracy. Thank you for listening, and please consider giving me one of your votes on the 22nd of June.
Mr. David Evans. Sorry, David Benn, Liberal Conservative.
Good evening to the Chair and ladies and gentlemen. I'm honoured to stand as the Jersey Liberal Conservative candidate in coalition with the Progress Party. I've had a career in farming where I was elected to many posts of responsibility, including President of the Students' Union at college, Chair of the Potato Committee and Chair of many other committees. I was a grower director for the Jersey Producers and Merchants Organisation, and I've been privileged to be a member of the Honorary Police in St Ouen and St John. I'm also a member of the mustard seed team delivering aid to Romania. I've had a business in France coordinating building projects. I've got great experience of dealing with the public, industry, civil servants and politicians. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have the right to leave things as they are, to burden our children and grandchildren with ridiculous debt, little chance of a house, and environmental problems that threaten their very future. I cannot stand by any longer and watch the route that some of our government seems to be taking. We need urgently to review the hospital, to re-look at other options and to save many millions, and yet still have a hospital fit for purpose. For housing, I want to see houses built at a sensible price, with ecological technology that they be cheap to heat. We all have something to have a stake in there. For the environment, and this is a huge subject, and as rural parishes we are greatly affected, I want to be part of a new approach that draws everybody into playing their part. Whether it be farmers, vegetable producers, fishermen, businesses, car owners, house owners, etc., we all need to alter our approach in almost everything we do. Because if we don't, we risk the future of those we love most, our children, our grandchildren, and the generations to come. And we need renewables. I want to promote and help our business community and also support entrepreneurs who will, perhaps using digital technology, be a major part of our business future and enhance Jersey's standing internationally, particularly if we can educate them here. I'm interested in the arts, sports, leisure activities, and the promotion of community, which will help all our well-being and ultimately our health. I ask you to vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benn. Now I ask Mr. Lyndon Farmer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. John, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Since being re-elected to the States in 2018, I have worked on behalf of all islanders during one of the most difficult and challenging periods in recent history to ensure Jersey remained resilient, safe and financially secure. My key focus during the pandemic was on protecting our health, the economy and preserving islanders' jobs and livelihoods. In my role as a minister, I have represented the island overseas, both defending and promoting our interests and strengthening our relationships with other countries and jurisdictions. My key priorities for the next term of office are tackling the sharp rises in the cost of living, resolving the housing affordability crisis, rebuilding and further developing our economy, improving skills and education to provide new opportunities in retraining and reskilling for people of all ages, to finally getting our new hospital built on time and within budget and ready to be fully operational and treating patients by December 2026. And to make certain we get strong, decisive leadership to deliver improved management of the public sector, a smaller government structure, and rigid cost controls to ensure we are delivering the very best value for the taxpayer. Jersey is facing significant challenges, and it is important for islanders to elect a States Assembly that is both representative of our community and which contains the skills and experience necessary to deal with the challenges that lie ahead. The new States Assembly will require a combination of fresh thinking together with highly experienced people with a strong track record of tackling serious and difficult issues. I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that I am not in favour of the new electoral system, and especially not in favour of the removal of senators. And that's not just because I am one. Because of the three types of elected states member, the office of senator is, by virtue of its island-wide mandate, the most democratic and representative, and therefore the most accountable to the people of Jersey. The States Assembly should not, in my opinion, have made a decision to approve this package of reform without first seeking the endorsement of the electorate, and in the height of the pandemic when many islanders were focused on other issues. To finish, ladies and gentlemen, my aim is to be the best possible representative, to continue to serve our community, to uphold our parish systems and unique island identity, and to work hard on your behalf to secure our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Now, Mrs. Christina Moore.
Thank you and good evening. It has been a long and challenging 4 years. I believe we learn the most from the difficult times in life, and I'm afraid there are more challenges to come. Our high cost of living was already impacting our Jersey families before the crisis in Ukraine. I'm determined to restore our essential services of health and education, as they have been put at risk by the Alliance-led government. We must now stop our friends and families from leaving to seek a better quality of life elsewhere and focus on attracting people home and retaining the talent that we have so that we can treat our sick and teach our children. Since the elections, my job has been to hold the government to account. In doing so, my scrutiny panel has both raised concerns and also offered alternatives. We've amended the government plan to ease the pressures of the cost of living. And in response to my work, a special project team is now working up options for the next government to bring forward measures ahead of winter to help ease the burden of the cost of living. I will focus on returning us to a place in the top 20 of the OECD Better Life Index. We have fallen back during the last 4 years as wages have failed to keep up and also housing and health have been slipping behind. Here in St Peter, we understand the importance of quality of life. We all got behind plans for affordable homes back in 2018 because we know that our young families want to live close by their relations and enjoy life out in the West. Thankfully, we have now got that land rezoned and some more too. But I regret that those homes aren't already built. Those families could have bought their houses at a cheaper price than they will once they are built. They could have also been spared the long 4 years of stress and worry. If I'm elected, as one of your 4 deputies, I will ask the next States Assembly to vote for me as your Chief Minister. I believe that the people are telling me that they want a new government, one that will deliver change and be accountable. Jersey has punched above its weight and played a role on the international stage for centuries. We have much to be proud of, but there is a better way. Let's boost our economy, deliver the best future for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Now, Mr. Ian Gorse.
Good evening. I'm Ian Gorse and I'm pleased to stand before you as an independent candidate. I very much hope to have the opportunity of representing you and St Peter's in the States for the next 4 years. I am, however, sorry that islanders are no longer able to vote for an island-wide election. I tried to save senators. I brought a proposition to keep the senators. If we elect enough candidates who support senators, then we can bring them back at the next election. Since 2018, my job as Minister for External Relations and Financial Services has been to stand up for Jersey in the world and to help grow our economy. I negotiated a Brexit deal for Jersey which maintained our constitutional privileges and protected our trade. We delivered new and tougher immigration controls which will make more use of work permits in the future. Brexit was not Jersey's decision and the negotiations weren't easy, but I stood up for the island and defended our position before French and EU politicians and the international media. We weren't bullied and we can be proud that we successfully came through a challenging period together. I am proud of Jersey. We are a successful community, but of course we have our challenges. I strongly believe government is spending too much, wasting too much, and borrowing too much. I want to reduce our debt and to ensure we spend our existing resources wisely. The housing crisis is having an impact on our ability to keep our talented young people and is leaving them without hope. My manifesto includes commitments on delivering affordable homes in appropriate locations, giving assistance to first-time buyers and supporting affordable purchases. We also have an ongoing cost of living crisis. Government should help where it can by cutting fuel duty and supporting lower and middle earners. I am a strong supporter of our parish communities. I want the constables to stay in the States. We must continue to deal also with speeding in the parish and take action to tackle repeat offenders. We must protect our green countryside, our natural beauty. We are rural parishes and must remain so. That includes not urbanising the 5-mile road. I ask for one of your votes on the 22nd of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gorse. I now ask Mr. Hewling, Independent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming along this evening. I recall standing here at the single parish Hustings in 2018. I think it's because do I stoop? Can I try again? I recall, is that coming through? Yes. I can't hear myself. I recall standing here at the single parish hustings in 2018, and never did we imagine what the world would have in store for us. Brexit, COVID, and the atrocities in Ukraine have reshaped the world we live in. All the while, the day-to-day issues were dealt with. So, what have I achieved? I sat on the Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, Public Accounts Committee, and Planning Committee. I was invited to be Assistant Chief Minister and took on responsibility for our migration and population challenges. I've also sat on the Political Oversight Group for our hospital project. I have supported many parish St Peter residents with their issues. These include working with the constable to install 2 speeding calming measures, and they have worked. It may sound trivial, but it's really helped those people along those roads. Most notably, I've ensured that people affected by PFOS pollution have had their health fears recognised by the government and are being tested. I think it's fair to say I've been busy. I have not shirked the big challenges and will continue not to do so. 4 years ago, my banners said, "Vote for change." And as an independent campaigning to enter the Assembly, I knew something was wrong, but needed to be in the Assembly to really understand what it was. To me, it's now crystal clear. I'm afraid that an affluent island like ours is not delivering as well as we can for those we serve. Education is good, but our state school outcomes are slightly worse than the UK. In health, our waiting lists, for example, are unacceptable, and our ability to recruit the talent we so desperately need is concerning, to put it mildly. I worry about the young and their future in Jersey. But what is most disturbing is, whilst knocking on doors recently, is the number of people who say they won't be voting. Why, I ask, the answer is invariably, well, it won't make any difference. Nothing will change. They hit the nail on the head. Well, if nothing will change, you must look at the root cause of why, and then you have to address it. I believe, and the Jersey Alliance believes, ministerial government isn't working. This needs to be fixed urgently so the people of Jersey can have the government it deserves. Thank you, and I ask you all for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hewling. And now ask Ms. Lucy Stevenson, Independent.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Lucy Stevenson. I'm a mum of 2. I've been a JEP journalist for over 13 years. I'm a charity governor, and I have a small, genuine Jersey business. It's often said that politics shouldn't be about personalities, and that's true. It's about so much more. But politics is about people. And that's why I'm stood here today, because our government has forgotten what it's like to put real people at the heart of decision-making and to connect with islanders in a meaningful way. Last week, as I met people on doorsteps in St Peter, this message was made even more clear. People do not feel listened to, valued, or communicated with. And it's no wonder nearly everyone I speak to says they want change. We're now at a crossroads where together we can make that change as a community. It's time for a new start, for a reset. It's time for a fresh perspective that's still proudly Jersey. So what does a reset look like, and how do we make it happen? Well, it starts right at the beginning, by electing a diverse group of politicians who can truly represent islanders and their interests. I passionately believe that diversity around the decision-making table leads to better outcomes. And we then need those people to be committed to working collaboratively and to positive politics. They need to be good at listening, compassionate, and capable of connecting with people. We also need strong, inspiring leadership. And myself and my Better Way 2022 colleagues are committed to all of those things. I've put housing, education, and the cost of living at the heart of my manifesto because that's what so many of you have told me matters right now. No individual or party can claim to be able to tackle any of those big, complex issues alone. We've got to work together as a community. Here in St Peter, whoever you choose on the 22nd of June will also have the task of representing 3 parishes. That's going to be a challenge and an opportunity, but we can strike that balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy Stevenson. Now, that completes the introductory talks of our candidates. And ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now yours. So I now invite questions. Wait a minute, there was a hand very quickly up there. Name and parish, please.
Martin Willing, St Peter, Dewey.
St Peter. We'll take a question from you. And there was another hand. Yes. John Hayes, St Peter. Your question, please, Mr. Willing.
Yes, I would like the sitting, what I call the sitting candidates, to tell me how they came by the decision of 805 million for the world's best hospital and the worst site, and those that are proposing themselves as candidates, what they might do about it. And also, I'm very interested to know if the £2.5 million promised to the Opera House, which has now become a slum on Gloucester Street,
I think
has
we'll
actually
address
gone
the
into
first
account.
question about the hospital,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back to the Opera House, I dare say, later. But your question is relating to the hospital
Well,
and
finance,
the cost.
really. All
Thank
right.
you, Mr. Willing.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes?
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay. There's so much that I could question the prospective candidates tonight, but one thing that bugs me really is wastage of money. And the question I have for them is, why do we go away to employ so-called experts when we have the capability of running our own island? Parker is a typical example of this. Last week, we saw people getting paid 80,000, 70,000, 50,000. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of money. And what would you do about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Well, there we are. Our first 2 questions, one related to the hospital, and one is about employing or bringing in outside experts and the costs related to that. So we'll start with Mr. David Ben. Thank you, David.
The hospital first. Thank you for your question, Mr. Willing. During the time that I've been talking to people in the run-up to this election, I've spoken to many. Not one person has said to me, good site, excellent, good value for money. Every single person has said, rubbish site, far too expensive. Every single person. Nobody has backed that hospital where it's going to be, possibly, and for the price. It is ridiculous. We have several other sites. I believe the government in the past bought the buildings in Kensington Place. Did they not? They did. And one is being demolished now, and it's handed over to Andium, but Andium are prepared to hand it back, I understand. Why on earth don't we build the extension of the hospital where it is, and then modernise the hospital, perhaps saving up to 200 million? It's a ridiculous project to build it at Overdale. And of course, it's £40 million to put a road up there. And incidentally, I'm terribly interested in local history. That road going up to Overdale is where the army collected for the Battle of Jersey. So it's an important site. But it's a terrible place and a terrible waste of money. When you come to money wastage on experts, I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Hayes, because we have a lot of very talented people in the island. We send talented people, well, we send good people away to university to get educated, and then they get forgotten. It's ridiculous. We need to use the talent we have over here for our projects and to investigate what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lyndon Farmer.
Thank you. The States Assembly chose the site, they chose the access, and they chose the location of the new hospital. There is no ideal site for a new hospital as the last 10 years of wasted time and money has shown us. We've tried a number of options, they've all failed, the states have procrastinated, and as a result, it's cost us hundreds of millions more than it should have done had we not made decisions some years ago. So, like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, and there's a mixed view about Overdale, that is a site the state has selected. It's an elevated and peaceful location with really spectacular views. And I think for once we can have a hospital that is something we can all be proud of. And it's not just a hospital, it's 4 or 5 hospitals in one. 7 buildings make up the complex. And I have with me some information packs on the hospital that were shared with all candidates a couple of days ago to provide some facts. And I'm happy, I'll be at the door at the end, and if anybody wants one, please take one away and read some of the facts. For example, one of them is, as David said, is that the new access road is going to cost £40 million. Well, that is simply not true. It's a lot less than that. I have a complete breakdown of all the costs, which I'm prepared to share with you later. In relation to the experts, well, of course, we always try and recruit on island if we can. There are some expertise that simply don't exist on island, and we have to bring people in. It is always my preferred option to recruit islanders to do the top jobs, and we have a number of vacancies being advertised at the moment. So, and I would urge islanders who have the skills and experience to please come forward and apply for those jobs, and we will gladly receive their application and, if possible, employ them. Thank you.
Now, Christina.
Thank you. At the last election, you, the public, were angry that £451 million hospital project was being proposed. This government and their political oversight group has come up with an £804 million project. My scrutiny panel has published several reports. We've identified that the selection process was flawed, that the access route was unnecessary, and that the size and scale of the project is not properly justified. So you can well ask the members of the government why they have got this £804 million price tag, because it's simply wrong. We need a breather. We have spent already plenty of money to, without delay, go back to previous options and move forward and deliver a hospital within a reasonable time limit that will be able to serve the public of Jersey and not burden future generations with an unnecessary debt at a difficult time for our economy. With regard to the question about spending, I think that it is absolutely necessary to focus on the priorities. And as Lucy mentioned, a people-focused approach to that in terms of making decisions, holding government officials to account, and always focusing on delivery for the public. Very briefly, the way to solve the problem with local people not being selected for jobs is to choose the most suitable candidate and not that one with the best experience from the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ian Dawes.
Thank you. And Martin, you asked how did we end up where we are today, and Senator Moore has really explained it. At the last election, members stood before you and said the new hospital at the Gloucester Street site at less than 500 million was too expensive and they could build it cheaper. And they had a vote in the Assembly. Senator Moore and myself were joined by about 4 others maybe, if we're being charitable, and they said they were going to go back because there was a better site and they could do it cheaper. And the rest, as they say, is history. We're now looking at where we are. I take a very nuanced view. You've been telling me round St Peter that you are divided on the hospital. There is now planning permission. It is an expensive build. And I think the right thing for the incoming government to do is to, Senator Moore uses the term breathe, I use the term reflect, because we need to be absolutely open with the public about what has been spent to get to where we are today, what the hospital would actually cost, because we know that inflation is running wild and materials cost even more than they did when we started on this, and how long it's going to take. We need to come before the public with what alternatives would cost, because I don't think they are as cheap as they were 4 years ago, and we need to have an open and frank discussion with the public so we can put it to bed for once and for all, because we need a new hospital. Islanders deserve a new hospital. I'll try and answer the other one in my others, because I've gone over time, haven't I? Sorry.
Mr. Hayes, your question will be addressed by Mr. Gorse a little later. Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Hewling.
Thank you. I sat on the political oversight group with Lyndon Farmer, and a lot of what he said I will not repeat. The site has been chosen by the Assembly, the financing has been chosen by the Assembly, and the planning permission has been approved. We will go ahead and build a hospital. Now, it's quite clear that, and I think we put it in our manifesto, it's the least worst site. If there was a good site, we would have found it 10 years ago, but we haven't. And when I was invited to, at the beginning of the term, to review the decision-making process of the hospital, I read all the documentation leading up to 2018, and it's quite clear there were a catalogue of poor decisions going through. Doing infrastructure projects is not Jersey's strength. One of the worst decisions was to pull the debate in 2016 on People's Park. People's Park was possibly the best option, but politically it became unacceptable because of local, I'm going to call it NIMBYism. I think we have to put it in perspective, this hospital. If you work out that we spend £250 million a year on health today, if you work that out at 4% inflation, over the next 40 years, we will spend on health just shy of £20 billion. £20 billion. The reality of it is we take out a bond for 750, and that will be fixed for the 40 years. The repayment of that bond at the end of the term will be considerably less, more like about 375 of today's value. Let's look at a healthcare service and not a building on a hill. That is the most important thing. Can I take the option as well to answer Mr. Hayes' question later? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I can see this problem occurring again. We have two really good questions tonight, and by the procedures of this meeting, I'm permitted to give the candidates 1.5 minutes to answer two questions. It is incredibly difficult when the subjects are complicated as these are to somehow swiftly go through them. And I think that leads to some dissatisfaction. So I'm going to be a little more lenient, I think, because these politicians have to be allowed to say what they want to say, and I think you're entitled to hear what you want to hear. If there's any objection to this new ruling, I'm prepared to listen to it, but 1.5 minutes to answer two questions does appear to me to be too short a time. And we'll be forever returning to questions like this. I mean, on my right-hand side, these good people have answered both questions, having cut short on one. And now I can see the pattern might develop where we have to go back and answer the question later. So please leave it to my discretion. And I hope we will return to the Opera House, not the Opera House, yes, the Opera House, has been mentioned, and also the outside experts with the enormous amount of money they cost this island. Those are important subjects. Thank you, Lucy.
Okay. There's no denying we need a new hospital. 10 months ago, I had a baby in that hospital. We need a new hospital. But I do remain uncomfortable with the Overdale site option, the size, the scale, the cost, and the manner in which actually the decision, not the initial decision has been taken, but what's ensued since then, and we've heard it this evening as well. There's a difference to me between strong leadership and constant threats, actually, and not allowing the rest of us to have perhaps the conversations that is needed to have. So as other speakers have said, I would welcome a conversation when the next assembly is put together. I would say that I do should declare perhaps an interest that I would have to take advice on, in that I have a family member that lives in the vicinity of Overdale. So it would probably not be me that brings a proposition personally, and I would have to take advice about how I was able to take part in a debate. To move on to the second question, I work at the JEP. We've written lots of headlines about consultants and UK consultants. I'm very aware of it as an issue. I think we've got carried away with it. We've had some very UK-focused, very senior civil servants who've perhaps looked to the UK too quickly. We also don't have good succession planning in place in our government, and we haven't done for a long time. Just one quick thing I would like to say about the way that we do communicate, where we do need experts to come from other places, the UK or other way, is because we are a small place and sometimes we will need that. And sometimes it will command high market rates for the jobs that they do. But we don't communicate that very well. We don't explain it. We don't say why. And we end up in a situation where someone like me writes a news story about it, we all get angry about it, and it perpetuates this idea, which is unhealthy, and we don't make progress as a community. Thank you.
Sorry. We're not addressing another question just yet. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you. These two questions, in fact. Fortuitously, I think these two questions happen to go very well together, so I'm going to address them together, because clearly one of the reasons the hospital project has become so expensive is that the whole thing's been going on for a rather long time, and it manifestly hasn't shown government decision-making at its best. As for the site, the decision's been made. We need a hospital, and we need it fairly urgently, so we need to get on with it on the site that's been chosen. But coming back to the underlying point about the slowness of government decision-making, that, I think, has something in common with what we've seen in previous regimes of appointing lots of civil servants and perhaps a tendency to impose so-called best practice and blueprint models without really considering their fit to a full understanding of the local situation. There clearly are areas in which we need outside expertise. Hospital doctors would be an obvious example. But I think in the civil service, with a government managing things well and a well-managed civil service, we should be largely recruited internally. As to the waste of money, you were talking partly about staff employment. I think a big area is also consultancy, and I think we need to get away from excessive consultancy reviewing things. It's an abdication of responsibility for decision-making, which needs to be assumed by the government, as well as a waste of money. Thank you.
My apologies to you, Helen.
No problem, thank you.
Right, now we come on to our second pair of questions. Bearing in mind we've still got to deal with the outside experts from two of our candidates. Can I have the next pair of questions? Yes, please. No, behind you. Yes.
Robert Surcouf, Grand Lantane, St Peter's. At the last election, there was much talk about housing being unaffordable, and the situation has got worse. What are your views of what happened over the last 4 years, and what must happen in the next Assembly?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Just here.
Thank you. Chris Perkins, St Peter's. Thank you very much for all the candidates. I'm very able, and I wish I could cast 7 votes at times this evening. But a little disappointed, really, that not much mention of the environment in any of the opening speeches, probably with one notable exception. So I'll throw you in just one quick question from an island-wide point of view. There was a proposition brought in the Bridging Island Plan for a marine conservation park, which sadly wasn't passed. So I would just ask you, if a similar proposition was brought and you were in the next Assembly, would you vote for a marine conservation park, and why? And if you wouldn't, why not? Thank you.
Thank you. So it seems to me we have a question here on housing and one on the environment. Now, where do we start? Mr. Farnham, thank you.
Thank you. I think the simple answer to housing is we have failed to provide the necessary supply of housing. That's been compounded by the Brexit and COVID issues, which have put all sorts of unforeseen pressures on our local community. The States Assembly, in approving the Bridging Island Plan, have agreed to rezone land for almost 4,000 homes. And in the next Assembly and the next government must ensure those homes are built. And not only are they built, but they are allocated appropriately to affordable housing. And also, I think we need to ensure that we provide young islanders with financial support. I'm talking about 100% loans, longer-term loans, 40-year loans, deposit support schemes, shared equity schemes, some different types of shared equity schemes which allow the owner to pay for their home over a long period of time. We sort of have this obsession with mortgages, 20 and 25-year mortgages, and if you miss 3 payments, you're out. There needs to be a lot more flexibility over home ownership and a lot longer to actually acquire it. And Chris will probably know that I bought the amendment to the Bridging Island Plan on the Marine Park because simply we need to protect our own waters and we need to take advantage of all the benefits that can bring to our environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Housing, it comes back to priorities and putting housing first. We knew that this was something we needed to address within our community, and therefore it should have been put front and centre. Take the hospital, for example. That decision about the site has not taken into account the impact it has on housing, because Overdale actually could make, now that we have the Jersey Water site, an excellent site for some additional housing. The temporary facility at the old Lake Ennevé school site blocks housing, and so we need to think about things through a housing lens. Yes, we ought to also be driving down the cost of sites and driving down the cost of building by looking at new methods of materials. I brought an amendment successfully in the Bridging Island Plan, which will enable that to happen. The environment, I think that leads naturally on, is extremely important. And I think we ought to move towards a circular economy, one where we demolish a building, we do things with the elements of it, and we reduce the waste that we create within our society. On the specific point of the marine park, I did vote against that, although I actually believe that we should have a marine park. But the particular proposal that was brought to the Assembly was flawed, sadly, and I would look forward to one that was appropriate for Jersey returning so that I could vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Gorse?
Thank you, Robert. It's difficult, I suppose, to say why it didn't. We look back, one of the things I was proposing 4 years ago was a housing commission for all sorts of reasons that we know that wasn't taken forward by the government. There are some technical things we need to do. The housing minister needs to be absolutely empowered to make decisions in a joined-up way with property holdings. I would take property holdings, combine them with the housing department, make sure they also have connection with SOJDC and those development centres so that actually you can look at it through that housing lens and somebody is empowered at the heart of government to make decisions to get those sites moving and to get houses built. We need to use lower cost construction. If we don't use lower cost construction, we can have all of the funding mechanisms that we like, but we'll still be funding expensive housing. So we need lower cost construction, we need state-owned sites dealt with in that way, and we also, I think, we can use some of our reserves. We've got £1 billion, in the strategic reserve, the rainy day fund. That's invested around the world. It's about time we took some of that money and invested it in local housing for our young people on our sites, and I think we can still have that big reserve and do that. Marine Conservation Park, I voted against it for all of the reasons that I said in the Assembly. I think that we can make progress, however, in the next 4 years, because we'll have moved beyond Brexit. We won't be in the heat of all of that. And I think if we work with the European Union, then we can get them to promote marine parks, and we'll be able to move on and do it. I'll come back to the UK consultants if I can. We've used far too many, but actually we're just not very good at HR right across the board. There's a famous parishioner sitting on the front row. When he was in the States, he tried to get us to control salaries full stop. And that worked for a while, and then it got out of control again. So we've got good local people. We're not recognising their experience and their qualifications, or we're not paying them properly, and then we're bringing in others that don't understand Jersey. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to make sure that we are equipping people who are already here to take the jobs that we so desperately need to be filled. Thank you.
Housing. Quite simply, we set targets and failed to deliver them. I'll give you an example. In the Bridging Island plan, we agreed at the outset that we were going to build 600 homes, affordable homes on green zones. Because of the way we went through that process, picking each individual field piecemeal, we voted them independently. We came out with 375 homes. We've left 225 homes on the table that will not be delivered to families going forwards. That is very typical of the sort of things we have been doing. No joined up thinking and working that one out. Another thing I saw, we've been building 1 and 2 bedroom flats like galore in the middle of town. That's great, but nobody's given consideration. There's no strategy of giving consideration as to where people go after their 1 and 2 bedroom flat. They have a small family, they need to move up. There's been no building as a sequence to sort the whole of the island out, ending up in potentially in retirement homes. We have to invest in modern methods of construction. There are very many companies wanting to do business with us. There are environmental benefits, cost benefits, and more importantly, resource benefits, because less people on island will be required to build those, and we have issues with that indeed. I will move on very quickly to the sea is our most natural resource, it's our most welcome resource. I did vote against it, and for the same reasons as the 2 previous speakers. The principle was great, however, there were some fundamental flaws within the proposition. Can I just make one comment to Mr. Betts? I'm going to talk about the consequences of what happens by recruiting in these consultants and people from the UK. It destroys the aspiration of our young who think they will ultimately want to get to the top of their tree in their island. And when they're on their way up, they see somebody big parachuted in to take that job. That's the consequence that worries me. Thank you.
Lucy?
Thank you. Nearly every conversation at the moment comes back to housing, doesn't it? It's no surprise, though. We knew it was coming, but we are where we are. I think one of the reasons, Robert, to go to one of your questions was to why has nothing happened? Well, I think the current government has perhaps shied away from making a lot of decisions. The reasons for that would probably take me a lot longer than I have right now. In my view, just building more isn't the only answer. We need to look at a blended approach. We need to look at vacant properties, whether we're building the right kind of homes to help people in the future if they decide to move on and free up family homes, have constructive conversations around that. I would like to see us look at the taxes we can use to try and help people in different ways, be flexible, basically. We knew this was coming. There's lots of state sites still sitting empty that were sitting empty many years ago, and yet they're still there. And I think we have been building the wrong kind of housing in some cases as well. Mr. Perkins, to come to your question, it isn't my area of expertise, I will admit that, and my understanding from the reports that I'd read was that the feedback was that perhaps the proposition wasn't quite right at the time. It's certainly something I would like to hear more about if you're willing to talk to me, or others are as well. In my view, the environment and the commitments we've made as a government are quite bold, and the environment isn't just a nice to have. But we need to remain firm in our commitments, because there is a risk with so much else going on in the world that actually that's going to fall to the bottom of the pile, and it will be up to your next States Assembly to ensure that that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. First question on housing. This is clearly a key area of our manifesto in reform, and you may have seen that we have not just a manifesto, but also, because it is so important, a housing crisis action plan, which we have committed to act on as soon as we form a government. I'm just going to take a small number of points from that because I haven't got time to cover them all, but a key one is that we believe that any publicly owned land developed for housing should be 100% affordable housing. That was brought to the previous Assembly by the Reform members, and it was rejected by the Assembly. Another key part of our housing crisis action plan and our housing policy is that where we have affordable housing developments, such as Villa Manoir, and I know it's done on this basis, they will be shared equity, with the shared equity part remaining in perpetuity, so that that stock remains in the affordable gateway beyond its first owners. I'm going to have to move to the environment. There's a lot more I could say about housing, but not within the time limit. The environment, I was disappointed to see the Marine Park didn't get through, and I would certainly support that. As I understand it, there were some problems in the specific detail of the proposition, and clearly when you're putting in this kind of legislation to protect, it brings with it regulation, and there's a balance always between the protection and the detail of the regulation. But I would certainly hope that's something that can be done by the next Assembly, and I'd fully support it personally. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ben?
Yes, housing is a very large part in our manifesto, so please do look at it. It's terribly important for young couples who want to have a house to be able to afford to buy one, and we would very much recommend to Andium shared equity so that people can afford. In my opening address, I did mention the option of ecological technology. We are way behind Europe, particularly behind France and Germany. Germany is probably the leader in Europe on homes that are insulated to such a point that they cost almost nothing to heat. It's incredible the technology that's out there now. And there's even things like earthships, and a lot of people in developments are building their own homes not using any cement whatsoever because of the environmental damage using cement. They're using other materials, and they're building fabulous homes. So I think we ought to be looking at that type of structure rather than the simple breeze block structure that we seem to use. Marine conservation, absolutely. It's been a great shame that we haven't moved further in that field. Of course, carbon sequestration is a major advantage, but also we ought to be talking with our fishing industry, with our very close French neighbours in France, about having a marine conservation park and developing sectional fishery blocks so that the fishermen can fish sensibly in a block and then move on to another block. But certainly I agree with the Marine Conservation Park. Thank you.
Thank you. That's our second round of questions now. Can I have some more? There's one there, and another one over there. There we go. Wait a minute. Wait for the mic, Mr. Lefevre. Wait for
No, I don't need that.
We won't hear you, John.
Right, I'll speak up then. First thing I want to ask you all, I'll ask you a question. Righto. I'm not a great one talking in these things, but it doesn't matter. Listen, I'll ask you a question, all of you, because I think that we all talk about cost. And, okay, but what the waste in Jersey of state's property, I'll ask you individually, when did any of you go up to St Saviour's Hospital? Because I go out on a Thursday with 3 mates of mine, and we went around St Saviour's Hospital. The area there is amazing. You could put up a tenth of the housing that this island needs. But how many of you have been up there? Now answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Lefevre. I take it that you're interested in building sites in Jersey, and particularly relating to St Saviour's Hospital. And if the candidates have visited that site to see how many houses they could build there. Correct? Yeah. Thank you. Name and parish, please.
Good evening. Patrick Lynch, Villa de l'Église, across the road in St Peter. The candidates may also know me as the Chief Executive of Caritas, the charity. We do a lot of work with people who are in poverty or homeless across the island. One of the biggest problems associated with that is the cost of living, as has been identified, and also the low wages that many people experience on the island. A lot of you address that in your manifestos, both parties and individuals, but what I would ask you this evening is, will you commit during the lifetime of the next Assembly to move the minimum wage, which is a poverty wage, to the living wage in a staged fashion over those 4 years?
Right, well, there we have another question. That is the movement from the minimum wage to the living wage within the next 4 years. Thank you for those questions. Right, where do we begin now? Christina Moore. Is that right? Yes, you started last time.
Sorry, my mistake.
No, two things on.
Right, so thank you for the questions. I haven't recently visited St Saviour's Hospital. However, I am aware that the Jersey Development Company have plans in place to start developing it and turning that site into housing. I absolutely appreciate that. We have not got a good track record of using our estate. An estate strategy was published during the life of this government. I found it to be a really flimsy and inadequate strategy. It needs some action points and it needs some clear way forward, because we have many underused sites that would be able to serve better purposes. For example, in town, we need to create some new schools and to improve the environment that our young children who grow up in often restricted circumstances due to the size of their accommodation. They need room to play and air to breathe while they're learning, and I hope that they will have enhanced opportunities to spend time in the learning environment and develop further interests alongside that. But you'll be able to read more in my manifesto when it is published on my website. The cost of living, Caritas are absolutely right to raise that. It was a concern at the last election, and it's an even bigger concern with rising inflation now. So absolutely commit to the living wage. I think I did so at the last election as well. But we also need to consider the role of small businesses and perhaps extending the considered size of a small business from 5 to a larger group of employees. But that's a slight side issue, but I wanted to get that in at the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and contrary to what some people think, I do occasionally go out east, not more frequently than I need to, you understand. So I have visited St Saviour's Hospital to look at the site in the last 4 years, but I've driven past it more frequently than that. And your question really does highlight the point I made earlier, that right now the Housing Minister does not have control of St Saviour's Hospital. He has had to fight and fight and fight to get it to be agreed to be a housing site, because other ministers have wanted it for other things. And we've farmed out bits of state's land as well to other bodies as well. So you need to give the housing minister that control over those sites so they can actually make progress and you actually get housing delivered on it. The Caritas living wage, I have supported increasing in the minimum wage. Even many years ago, I even supported Deputy Southern to move towards a higher minimum wage. I think that as we go through these really difficult times of inflation, you will be revising the living wage. That will be difficult as well. I think that there is an opportunity in the next 4 years to move to the living wage, i.e. the minimum wage would become about the same level as the living wage, but we will need to work with farming in particular. Hospitality is already, because of the shortage of supply of staff, moving to the living wage anyway. So the one sector we'll need to work with is farming, and if we commit to work with farming and support them, then we can move to the living wage, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hewling.
Thank you. Yes, I have been up to St Saviour's, and I believe that the housing minister has now got hold of that particular site, and it has been handed over for development. I can't remember details, but I know it came up in a meeting recently, so that is done. It is just very typical about the delay and how long it takes to free up these particular properties. La Folie being a prime example. We've got four owners of properties, Government of Jersey, Ports of Jersey, Andium and JDC, all trying to deliver something quickly. It's chaos, I hear that. The minimum wage and living wage. Look, we've got wage inflation at the moment. It's going to be absolutely impossible to track exactly what that one is. Wages are going up hugely in the hospitality area. Supply and demand is taking over. People are having to pay, and you are all going to be paying more to go into restaurants and to have that sort of service. I think the most important thing is, we're talking about agriculture, it's not how much people are paid, it's how much people have in the back pocket at the end of every single, at the end of that week, month or term when they're over here. So it gets quite complex when you're factoring in accommodation, cost of accommodation. If people don't have to pay accommodation, then a low wage becomes their net wage. And that's a fundamentally very different way of looking at it. So the answer is yes. One of the things, if I can finish, the Jersey Alliance will commit to reviewing the community cost bonus and the cost of living temporary scheme and making it more relevant. And if elected, we'll deliver a statement to the Assembly at the first meeting in September with some evidence and some data-based information of what that amount of money should be relevant. It was relevant to the people that need it. We'll deliver that in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
St Saviour's Hospital is one of the sites that, exactly in my previous answer about housing, that has been there empty for too long. I have tried to visit it, but we weren't allowed as journalists. I think we were told it wasn't in a fit state for us to go, which says an awful lot, doesn't it? On the housing subject, generally, I think, obviously, St Saviour's Hospital is in an area that we keep hearing when it comes to debates in the States about housing. The parishes seem to, they go against each other. We don't want extra housing. We've not got space in our schools. We've not got this. You need some housing. And actually, we're the parishes that a lot of them will look to and say, you need to take on some of your housing as well. And to create strong communities and keep our parishes strong into the future and places where we want to live, we do need to build some houses. Conversations about where that happens will be for the future, but I really believe, and it's in my manifesto actually, that as parishes we need to have parish plans. We should have conversations early involving everybody where we can hopefully come to some more healthy conclusions about the type of properties we'd need in our parishes and where they maybe could be built, so we don't end up in situations like we've just had in St One in the Bridging Island plan, having rows over 2 green fields. On the cost of living, Patrick, absolutely, yes, with the living wage. And I think the work that Caritas has done on that in the past 4 years has been incredible. And actually, people have really started to listen and are talking about it an awful lot more. It's now time for the government to step up and join that, I think. And I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the question about St Saviour's Hospital, if I'm not mistaken, the question you actually asked was when did we last visit it? I went and had a look at the parts that were accessible about 18 months ago. It just so happens I know the site very well, having had reasons for visiting it fairly regularly at a point in the very distant past when it was functioning as a hospital. The old building, of course, is a very fine building in grey granite. Most of the other buildings are not, as far as I'm aware, of any particular merit or distinction. And just to anyone who's not aware, it's a very large site that spans both sides of the road. There's a considerable amount of land on the side of the road opposite the main building. What we would do, clearly, it's part of our housing crisis action plan, as I've already said. In Reform, it's publicly owned land, and it should be developed for affordable housing, and it should really already have been done, but certainly it should be done as soon as possible. On the second question of the living wage, yes, that is one of our key pledges that we've set out in our manifesto, specifically to increase the living wage to £10 an hour from the 1st of October 2022, and we've worked out how we can do that by lodging a proposition as soon as the new Assembly is formed, and then in stepped increases from there up to the living wage. Stepped precisely because of the problem that's been identified that employers, particularly in agriculture and particularly small businesses, do need some time to adjust upwards. So yes, both questions quite core to our manifesto in Reform. Thank you.
Ben?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the east side of the road, aren't you? To the old St Saviour's Hospital, the big granite building. You weren't referring to the other side. Yeah, yeah. Every time I pass there, I cannot understand why it's empty. It's just a conundrum. It shows a lack of joined-up thinking on behalf of the housing. I was rather worried, actually, that a private developer might get it, but I'm very pleased to hear that no, and that we are actually eventually going to be developing it. But of course the actual main building is protected, isn't it? So that we can't develop that into individual housing, but it will be units. On the living wage and homeless, I can't understand why there is one single person homeless in the island. And the mention has been made of agricultural workers. Agricultural workers are not those who are homeless. Agricultural workers earn very well when they're working. They work extremely hard, but they are not the homeless ones. I mentioned in my statement at first that I've been to Romania, and I've been to Romania many, many times. And what you see out there is absolutely horrible. It's just terrible. It is improving, but it is still horrible. We should not have one single homeless person in this island. I know people have problems with drink or family problems or whatever, and they fall into a trap. But when it comes to financial reasons, we shouldn't have one. The problem that we have to recognise is that we're going to have them now. This current spike in prices all around the world is going to hurt a lot of people. And I think we're going to see problems that we need to address very quickly. Thank you.
That was a living wage. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. And now, Mr. Farmer.
Thank you very much. I have visited St Saviour's last year, and I think the year before. It was of particular interest during the site selection process for the new hospital, and an ideal site for housing. And one of the reasons why the cost of the new hospital is 800 million is because we're consolidating the whole of the health estate into one site. That frees up somewhere toward 30 sites around the island, including the St Saviour's complex, for housing. The actual cost of the hospital at Overdale is less than half of the 804 million. The rest is on other buildings and other parts of the campus. And importantly, in that price, we don't take into account disposals of land for housing, which will bring in significant sums of money. So one of the advantages of siting the hospital at Overdale is it frees up a number of sites around the island for housing, far more housing than we could actually put on Overdale itself. The government and I have supported the move to the minimum wage, but as I think Helen said, we have to allow time for businesses, especially smaller businesses, to adjust so we don't actually lose jobs on the way to achieving that goal, but I fully support it. Thank you.
Right, our fourth pair of questions, please. There's one there, thank you, and one at the front, thank you.
Firstly, I would just like to thank the current Minister, his Deputy, AG and Director of Public Health, Peter Bradley, that finally understood the importance of the PFAS health-related problems on the island and already agreed to assist the residents with these health concerns. Please may I ask, how do you all feel about these forever chemicals being in our main water supplies, and what do you propose to do about the continued health risks of PFAS exposure to all islanders today, knowing that some places in the world are now taking a zero tolerance to this?
Did you hear the question? Yes. Did you hear the question? What was the name of the question? And the second question from Mr. Laharis, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Roy Laharis here. Despite the ceaseless travelling of Senator Gorst as he goes from one finance centre to another, we're told that the finance industry, if we look objectively at it, is in long-term decline, or at least it's flatlining, compared, for example, to our Guernsey colleagues. What are the plans, and I see the shake of the head, what plans and what new thinking do members have for alternatives in the Jersey economy? And could they also include their thoughts on the revival and the support for agriculture and tourism? Thank you.
Thank you. So there are our fourth pair. Christina, would you like to? I think it's sorry? Yes,
Ian first, yeah.
Christina, no?
No, Ian.
Ian. Why have I got this muddle on? Right, Ian.
I'll try and answer your PFOS question quickly, because I know more about the answer to the second question. I've supported Roland in his work with the Health Protection Unit to do the testing. That testing must continue. If that testing finds the issues that I know some of you think are there and we're trying to prove, then you should have the full support of the state to deal with whatever that testing finds. And I stand by that work, and you will have my support to take whatever measures are required, depending on what that testing finds. I do, as you would expect, Roy, refute the suggestion that Jersey's finance industry is in long-term decline. I would do that anyway, but I particularly do when you suggest to us, contrary to Guernsey, where theirs isn't. The reason that productivity in the finance industry largely we've seen tail off, as we all know, is because we have a major banking centre, and we know that interest rates have been very low for a very long time. We're going to see those start to tick up. So we will see, just by simply increasing interest rates, increasing in productivity in the finance industry. And so it's an external factor. But there are other areas where we continue to see growth. We continue to see growth in funds. We're putting forward strategies to have a green finance centre. That is absolutely where our future should be, and it will be. I believe that we can keep financial services strong. They can continue to pay their way. We're going to even get more money out of them when we implement the OECD tax work. I'm absolutely confident that it's not in decline, and that if we take every measure necessary, we continue to be well regulated, meet the highest international standards, islanders can be sure that it will provide a good living for them and a good standard of living, and it will provide a future in this island. Thank you.
Global understanding of the effects of the PFOAs family, there are 4,000 of them, is growing on a daily basis. It is becoming accepted that there are health concerns to do with cholesterol, thyroid, and various cancers. The evidence is still being sought to clarify that. We mustn't get confused between the evidence of that and some of the court cases that have been settled by juries in the US. But I'm confident enough to know that we must pursue and keep a real track on what is actually happening, the health problems. One thing is interesting is when I started this, when I first came across this forever chemical, thank you, 4 years ago when I was campaigning, the acceptable level of PFOS in water was 1 part per billion in the European regulations. 3.5 years later, 4 years later, that has been reduced. It keeps on coming down to 0.3 parts per billion. I think that's a recognition on a global scale of the impact that this product is going to have. All I can say is I've been on this journey with the residents of St Peter's for 4 years. I've learned far too much about it, and I don't like what I learned, but I will stand by you and continue to support you. On the finance sector, the thing that worries me is in the 90s, productivity was £250,000 per person. It's now down to about 135. I think it's sneaking up again. The only way we can look at that is to seriously look to automation for compliance and audit and regular process that we can do. That's my only suggestion to it. We have a thriving business. We have a fantastic reputation on the global stage. We mustn't lose that. We must build on it, but we just must make sure we are all more efficient in the processing of money on behalf of our clients. Thank you.
I've written quite a lot while I've been at the JEP about the PFAS situation in Jersey, and I have to say that I was always very shocked and frustrated that you weren't getting some support earlier, but it's been encouraging to see it happen finally. And I hope, as others have said on the table, that depending on what happens next, you continue to get that support as well. And I'm sure you will absolutely hold everyone to account on that matter, as you have done already, I know. We do know that the safe levels internationally are going to keep reducing, and that's going to continue to be a challenge across Jersey, not just for those of you having the situation with the blood tests at the moment. And I actually think there's a wider issue that we need to start looking at as an island to do with getting people onto mains water. When we live in an island that is so covered in agriculture as well, I find it utterly ridiculous that we still have so many properties that are not on mains water, and we haven't actually made more of a government commitment to try and find a funding mechanism to help make that happen. It's not something that we can do overnight. It's going to cost a lot of money, but we've not even set out that we should do it. It's been brushed aside. Jersey Water do their few homes every year that they can afford to do without the political support to do it. So that's a conversation that really needs to happen. The finance industry, I know the finance industry is not my area of expertise, but I would like to see Jersey have a vibrant economy. Now this the vibrant economy has been criticised on Facebook, I saw recently. What is a vibrant economy? And it comes up every election and then everybody goes away. But to me, a vibrant economy is somewhere where our children want to come back and work and be creative and see their futures and provide us with interesting experiences as well. And it comes back to Jersey's appetite risk, and we've become very risk averse as a government, as an island. We don't like failure, so we don't try anything new, and I would like to see that change even just a little bit. I think it could make a difference for us all.
Yeah, thank you. On PFOS, indeed the commitment's been made, the testing's underway, and the commitment's been made, and whoever's elected to the next assembly, we need to follow that through. And I think there are kind of two prongs to that, aren't there? One is the commitment to work with the people who've been tested and follow up the next steps on that. And secondly is keeping abreast of the growing research evidence, because it is a concern more widely, to look at possibilities for reducing the existing level in the current water supply, which in some senses is a bit different from the undoubtedly much higher levels in some people's water supply in the past. But clearly it's on the agenda and it needs to remain firmly on the agenda, and understandably it's been a cause of considerable worry to some of the people most affected. Secondly, on the finance industry and diversification of the economy, it's never good for an economy to be overly reliant on a single industry. I don't have time to go into any argument about how it may or may not be doing, Certainly in Reform Jersey, we support diversification of industries. We support also small businesses and locally owned enterprises. I think we're always at risk where too much of our economy is owned by people who don't have a stake in our own community. We have 3 small business owners standing as candidates, and one thing we have identified is that there needs to be fair access to licences for people operating in different sections of the economy. There's certainly perception that sometimes finance is favoured. Thank you.
The PFAS question is quite alarming, really, isn't it? Because we all want clean water. We all want water that is absolutely pure as we drink it. And the advice over the last few years has been that, yes, your tap water is grand. You don't need to buy water in plastic bottles. So it is a worry, and I do hope that the analysis will show that we can deal with it and show how we can deal with it. And hopefully, in the future, more research into water will come about. I'm not sure if your question was only about finance. I didn't think so. So, the question was a lot wider. Of course, we need a vibrant and a very profitable finance industry because it is the main industry in the island, that and the legal field, and then we have tourism and agriculture. Agriculture is about 3%, tourism is about 12%. We in the Liberal Conservatives would like to see more education so that people can train in other fields. And we're particularly keen in technology and seeing Jersey as a leader. I've been having some very interesting conversations recently about agriculture and fisheries, but about other industries that we can develop around that. Tourism, of course, we had a question and answer session with tourism last week, and it was illuminating. The main problem there, of course, is staff, but there are other problems as well. But we need tourism. But we should be developing other industries that can support more of our community and educating our local people so that they stay in the island, because a lot of our local people are going away. So yes, we need other industries for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was pleased to support the commitment and financial commitment towards the testing to deal with the PFAS issue. I don't have as much knowledge as Roland, but have been supporting his efforts, of course. And we do, as Lucy said, we need a very serious conversation about whether we provide the investment for mains water for the whole island. Of course, I know some people who live out in the countryside aren't that keen on having mains water. They think it will result in further development near their area, but actually it's probably not right that in this day and age there are islanders who are connected to water supplies that are not fit to bathe in, never mind drinking. I don't think the finance industry is in all that bad shape. I think Ian's looked after it fairly well. Could do better, I suppose, but we'll help him with that. I'm just getting him back. But of course, we know productivity was affected right across the island because of the low interest rates and the restructuring of the banking sector, which provided most of the GVA in that area. I'm pleased to deal with other industries because the Economy Department has, since the start of this year and finishing up its work of this session, has produced strategies for the full economic framework, the rural economy, the marine economy, of course tourism, which is essential because the thread of tourism runs just about through everything we do, including sustain our important air and sea links, and of course arts and heritage. We've just launched 2 strategies for those. Of course, we mustn't forget the economic value of those important sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowley.
Thank you. On the water subject, I know it might surprise you, but I do care very deeply about the quality of water throughout this parish and throughout the island, both whether that might be PFAS or nitrates, and also the quality of our air. It's absolutely vital that humans have access to both good quality water and air to keep them healthy. And I applaud the work that's been done, actually, to move forward, because I found it difficult when I was in a position to try and do something to make that move forward. And I do applaud the testing system and look forward to seeing what we can do to improve the health outcomes for people if high levels of PFAS are found. On the subject of the finance industry and the general economy, I believe that we're very lucky to have the finance industry, but yes, we must always look to diversify and create the best possible environment for business people to thrive, to find opportunities. So that means thinking about how we can make the pitch a better place for them to operate. That means looking at regulation, perhaps particularly for small and medium-sized business, having Jersey-sized regulation that enables and enhances the opportunity for startups, incentivizes people to get out there and have a go, because that's what makes life in Jersey vibrant, the small and medium-sized businesses that we all enjoy. And in particular, around tourism, we actually need to identify some sites perhaps for new hotels and new attractions to make our offering to visitors and islanders alike more interesting and dynamic and fit for the future.
It's now 9 o'clock, and that is officially the time that should end, but I'm quite prepared to take another 2 questions as the final 2 questions of the evening. So raise your hands high. There's one here, and one, I can see the arm, but I can't see the person connected to the other end of it. Right, name and parish, please.
My name is Edward Wyatt. I live in St Peter's. And my question is, let me think about how I'm going to phrase this. I guess, out of the people that I've spoken to, most of them really are not interested in these elections because, quite frankly, they have no faith in the Assembly or the candidates that are standing for it. The general perception is that they're more interested in bickering with one another than getting anything done and actually making a change. So, I would just like to hear your thoughts on the matter.
Thank you, and thank you, a young man, making a question. Next one.
I'm just playing. I've heard all your other questions, but I would like to know, being here during our occupation, we know what other people were doing and what was happening to us. And what I want to know is, how are you going to feed everybody if you're going to be overtaking green fields and agriculture? Where's the food going to come from? To supply Jersey without having to go abroad to bring this stuff in?
I hope the candidates heard the question, did you? Yeah. I'm not sure what it was, but...
Because
okay, the candidates appear to have heard the question.
Don't keep our inflation down. We should be growing our own products and everything else that will go and help us, Jersey, and the old age pensioners as well. Mind you, we're not that far off that you won't have to bother about us, but I mean, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, there we are, our two final questions. One...
I think you say about growing, you know, we need to grow food.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One is expressing some rather depressing thoughts about the way our states handle matters and their appeal to young people, I suspect. There we are. That's the nature of that question. Then we've got a second question, but our candidates have heard it and I'm not clear about it. So there we are, our final 2 questions, and I think we start with you, Roland.
Yep. All I can say is you don't have to sit through it for 3 or 4 days at a time. It's very, very grim. We are a small island economy of 100,000 people. We have to take on the whole of the world. The events that we've had over the last 3 years have been beyond our control, and I find it deeply frustrating that we can't get together as 49 people collectively to say, get out of bed every morning and say, what are we going to do to solve the problems and improve the world, improve the livelihoods of the people we serve. I find it deeply frustrating. We and the Jersey Alliance have had to bring together a party in order to try and take, effectively, not take control in a controlled way, if that means means of the situation. Our ideal is we could disband because we've gone back to independent system of government where everybody is working collaboratively together going forward for the common good of the island. That is our underlying goal behind it. I think it's awful and we really should do better. It's like watching 7-year-olds play football most of the time. I believe, as far as feeding ourselves, I believe that if we sweated every single corner of the green fields we got, we could produce about 20% of the food we need to survive us for our own consumption. I'm afraid that horse has bolted, which is a very, very sad reflection. The numbers of properties was about 0.02%, I think, of the green fields were allocated in the island plan. It's very small, but it's a direction of travel which we must try and arrest. And we must do far better, I agree, on looking at other opportunities for housing people in the island. And greenfields is the area of last resort. Well, certainly good quality agricultural greenfields. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
When I first said I was going to stand for election, somebody quite quickly said to me, well, don't bother trying to engage young people. They won't vote anyway. Now, what does that say about our approach to things? It's a defeatist attitude from the very start, and I don't blame you and the people you speak to for feeling like that. The really even more depressing thing is that it's no longer just young people. It's probably worse than actually I've ever known it in my 13 years as a journalist in Jersey. So what do we do? Do we just go along with it and let it carry on? Well, no, we don't. Of course we don't. To me, the solution is to elect people who are committed to working collaboratively, actually to positive politics. I am not totally against a future with party politics, but at the moment, I don't see it in a very positive light. And I think that really reflects on the whole system as well. So I would like to see some positivity, and also it does come back to the people that stand for election and the people that you choose to elect as well. I think there is a lot to be said for seeing people like yourself out there standing and then hopefully elected into government to really encourage people to engage as well. To come to food security, I think that is going to be a conversation that really does need to be had in the next 4 years. With everything that's been going on in the world recently, I think it's started to hit home and we can no longer ignore it like perhaps we have done in the past. We do need to be realistic, though, and it's got to be financially viable, not just for producers, but also for consumers and local people. And the reality is at the moment that we haven't quite got that balance right for all of our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. On first question, sadly, I think my experience is the same as yours, and I certainly have friends and know a lot of people who express similar views to the ones you've cited amongst your circle of acquaintance. I think we need to remember there's two kind of parts to being a states member which work together. One, you're representing your constituents, and two, you're part of the Assembly charged with governing the island. And I think, as states member, I would be mindful of both those things, and I would certainly want to be meeting regularly with constituents and constituent surgeries. I referred in my opening speech to having been impressed by the effective teamwork of Reform Jersey, and I think therein might lie part of the answer to the other side, the perception that nothing ever changes. And I think that working with a party with clear principles and clear values for what we stand for and what we will prioritise and set out to do, and our commitment to you in the manifesto, I hope would be part of a solution to the perception that things don't change. On the second question of green fields and food production, this again I think is very important. As I understand it, the green field zoned in the Bridging Island plan for housing, including Vildamanoir and others in the parish, that's the last time it's going to happen. We're not going to do it again. As a party, we're committed to building on government-owned land for affordable housing, and I think food security and sovereignty of producing our own food is very important beyond perhaps the economic value of it, and something we would certainly support on environmental grounds as well. Thank you.
When I told a friend that I was thinking of standing for the state, she said, "Do you want the name of a good psychiatrist?" And the reason that she gave is that you're going into something that you can't change. The one gov system was a terrible idea. And people are terribly disheartened with the way that our current states, which is the proper word for it, of course, is working. The states is not working for us, and we need to change it so that it will, but we certainly need to engage with young people. We certainly need to engage with everybody, but particularly with young people, because it's their future, and that is why I'm standing. Secondly, on the food security, this is a massive subject, which I know a lot about, obviously. The reason that, because we've just lost a very big producer of vegetables over here, and it's because of labour shortages, it's because of imported cheap stuff, and we're going to see more requirement for that as prices increase, because we can't produce vegetables in the island cheaply, because we haven't got economies of scale. But we can produce good vegetables at a reasonable price. And there is a move now to think about small units. People are wanting to go back into agriculture. And there is a move now to go back to small units which will produce in a coordinated way that they can supply the local market. And that's very important for our future security. But it's a long road to go down. It's not an easy one, but it's a long road to go down. But there's a lot more environmental issues with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think politics is either in your blood or it isn't. I've always been interested in politics, and we've had some members of the Assembly joined very young, which is important because we need an Assembly that represents our community. But politics by its nature is fairly divisive. There's a lot of tension, there's good, but there needs to be sometimes in good, healthy debate. That's what the States Assembly is. It's a debating chamber. I favour team politics over party politics. I'm not sure that the introduction of parties or the party experiment we're seeing at the moment and whether it will take off. I think Reform Jersey has been the most successful attempt and continued attempt at a party, and I give them credit for that. But actually where we see party politics in other jurisdictions, you see a lot more tension and a lot more competition than we see in our own state's assembly. Now, Senator Moore and I don't agree on everything, but we can work together on things we do agree on, and we challenge each other on things we don't agree on. I think that's the unique thing about Jersey politics, and long may that continue. In terms of food security, it's a huge issue. It's something we've been paying a lot more attention to recently with global issues as they are. We will always have to import the food we consume, but we're working hard now, and rural economy strategy and other bits of work we're doing on is aimed at developing more sustainable food and on-island food production. But the bottom line is consumers are voting with their feet and still buying their imported fruit and veg over local produce, but we must try and reverse that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. So controversial as it may be, I do think that this new system is seeing a really high level of competition in every single voting district. And I hope that everybody, whatever position they come from in society, can see people who are wanting to listen and engage with you and your views. And I think across this table tonight, we have got a choice for everyone. And I hope that willingness from all of us to listen, to engage, and to use the tools that we've got at this day and age. We have social media, which makes it really easy for people to send questions, for us to answer, and for different debates to be conducted amongst people in a friendly and a positive way. But I guess what's really, really important is that you all go away tonight and think about the people who are going to fit together and make the best possible team to represent this constituency of St Mary, St Juan and St Peter. And St Peter's not always last, of course. In terms of agriculture, we most certainly must protect our beautiful natural environment. Yes, we have to deliver homes, but there are limits to that. And I think that that's why we do need to look at utilising our space better. Take, for example, some of the commercial derelict glasshouse sites, where I put forward a proposal to use 50% of those sites for affordable housing, but to turn 50% of it towards community gardens or back to agriculture, because I think we do need to protect our food security. We need to think about what we can grow and perhaps encourage some more smallholders in the island so that we can enjoy hopefully organic produce and use a more food systems approach where we will have an ability for everyone to enjoy seasonal produce year round.
Thank you. We have a very long and strong tradition of independent politics in Jersey, and we have, I fear, slowly been losing it. I'm not sure about young people not being engaged. I've had to spend the last 3 mornings on the school run trying to explain to my 10-year-old daughter why she can't vote. If only we could bottle that enthusiasm and distribute it in the community. Politics is about the battle of ideas. It's about how we should govern ourselves. It's about how we should ensure that everybody's got a hope and a future. So it's right that we argue about the ideas. What turns people off is that when we don't actually then act upon what we've decided, what turns people off is when we're more interested in personalities and I don't like you and you don't like me and you once did this to me and you once did that. That's what turns people off from politics. We need to re-find our pride in independent politics where we can argue about ideas. If you don't like my ideas, if you don't like what I'm going to do, then you're not going to vote for me, and I just have to suck that up. I hope rather that you do and that you are going to vote for me, but it's about ideas. It's a really high calling, and we need to regain that, and we need to take pride in that. Food production is going to be more and more and more on the agenda because of the rising inflation, the war in the Ukraine. We've got really hard-working farmers across our 3 parishes, but they are struggling. It's been a very difficult year in potatoes. We've got very few now growing vegetables. We really do need to work with them to make sure that we are more sustainable and food is more secure in our community. And it's going to be a very big agenda over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a sense that there are many more questions, but time has beaten us on this. Thank you very much for those questions we've had tonight. We've covered quite a broad range of issues. You've been a very good audience, and I hope you think, as I do, that our candidates have done us a good job tonight. And on your behalf, I thank Helen and David and Lyndon and Christina and Ian and Roland and Lucy for coming along and expressing their views in a most coherent way. And you will have opportunities to hear them again in this constituency. And if I might just say the dates, on the 7th of June in St Mary's Parish Hall, Community Centre at 7 p.m, and again on Wednesday the 15th of June at St One's Parish Hall. So if you can encourage others in our constituency to come along and ask questions and to make this election an exciting and valuable one, because it is indeed an important one. There are 7,477 people out there in our constituency at this time who are eligible to vote. So let's hope they'll all come and vote on June the 22nd. So thank you all very much for your coming along this evening.
John, may I I just wondered if I may, on behalf of the candidates, thank you for chairing our meeting this evening, and thank you all for being here this evening, and we all hope you will turn out. It was a good showing at the polls. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would also like to thank our bell ringers at the end there, who've largely been ignored.